Okay guys, so in this part we're going to continue on and finish with the texturing, but before we do, there's something that I quickly want to adjust, and that is the barrel speed controller. Now currently it's set to a float type of controller, which means that when we want to keyframe this with different values, we need to double click that in order to manually type in a value and then keyframe it. So I think it's going to make things easier if we change the type of controller from float to slider. That way we can just slide it back and forth and keyframe it versus having to double click to manually type in a value. So let's go over to the barrels object, which contains the user data, and we're going to click on it and go to user data, manage user data. We'll click on the barrel speed controller. And here's the interface currently set to float, and we just want to change that to float slider. We'll click OK. Now here is our new slider, so we need to drag that up here to the viewport, right click on it, go to show always, and now we can remove the first one. So we'll hold down control to move this new controller up like so, and now it's just as easy as moving the slider in order to make the keyframe instead of having to manually type in a value. Okay, so now what we want to do is continue with the texturing, but I think I'm going to change it up a little bit, and here's why. If we go up here and we render this with that aluminum material set to this cylinder, it's not rendering as fast as what I would like to, and it's because we've got ambient occlusion on, and we've also got reflection on with blurriness applied. Now what if we want to use this type of material for most of the gun? And of course we're not, but what if we did? So let's drag this over here to the base stand object, and you can see that now this material is applied to more than just the base stand, and the reason for that is because the base stand is the base parent object here in the hierarchy list, and all of these things from the pitch point all the way down to the main body object here, all of these objects, let's see here, all of these objects here are all children of the base stand, which means that if they do not already have a material applied to them, then they are going to inherit the material that's applied to their parent. So in that case, all of these objects here, for example, we've got the main body. It does not have a material applied to it, so it's automatically going to inherit the material that's applied to its parent, which is the base stand, and we just applied the aluminum material to that, so now the main body is going to pick up on that as well. So if we were to render this from, we'll just pull the camera out and render it. Okay, now you can see it's kind of slowing down here a bit, and it's taking too long, and I want to speed this up. So let's just see how long this is going to take to render. Okay, so a total of 19 seconds. And in all honesty, 19 seconds really isn't bad for one frame. But I want to improve it to make it faster while still maintaining a really nice look like we have here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new aluminum material, and we're not going to use the reflection channel at all. We're going to start using the environment channel. So let's take this aluminum material and let's just control click and drag to copy it, and for the new one I'm going to call this one aluminum EN, and that's just going to stand for environment. So we want to keep the diffusion channel turned on, but since we're going to be using environment, then that means we need to enable the option here called Affect Luminance, because the environment channel acts like the luminance channel. So we need to turn that option on. Now we can turn the reflection channel off. We'll activate environment, and we need to load up our HDR image. So now we have this bright chrome looking mirror finish, which is not what we want. So what we need to do is take this material and drag it over on top of the original aluminum material that we have here for the base stand. And now when we render, now we get this very bright chrome look. And of course, we don't want that type of look. So we want to change some values here for this. So the first thing we want to do in the environment channel is bring the brightness down to about 25%. But you'll notice that it's still a mirror type of finish, meaning the reflections, or in this case the environment, which is this image, this HDR image, is still sharp. So we want to blur it. So let's go here to the blur offset, and we'll just take all these values to 25. So I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to remove that original aluminum shader from the top cylinder. And now we'll preview render again. So it was originally 19 seconds, and now we've reduced it down to 5 seconds. And we're actually getting some really nice reflection in there. Actually, it's not reflection, it's actually faked. It's actually with the environment channel. So now, since we no longer need reflection, we can disable our HDR sphere. So now we need to determine what do we want to apply this new aluminum shader to. Well, I think it looks good on the base stand. So let's take it and apply it to the base stand, which we already have here. And I want to go in there and make some bevels for the base stand along the bottom, because right now we've got that sharp edge right there, and I want to kind of round that out. So let's click that, make a loop selection on that line in line mode. We'll go to bevel, 3 subdivisions with the type set to convex, and we'll bevel that to kind of round that out. And we need to take the Phong angle up to about 45 degrees. That will help smooth things out. And when we render that, now we get a really nice smooth look there. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to reuse the camo shader for some more parts, because even though it's applied to the box, I still would like to use it on some more stuff just to kind of give it a varying type of look to the gun instead of having it all metal and dark colors. So I'm going to go up here to the leg object, and I'm going to apply the camo shader to the leg object, which is the sweep nerve. So by default the projection is set to UVW mapping, and if we render, the pattern is actually a little too small. The scaling is a little too small for my taste. You might like that, but for me, I kind of want to make it a little larger. So the first thing I'm going to do is change this to cubic mode, and let's see if that made any difference. Okay, so it took it up maybe a little bit, but that's still too small for me. So what I would like to do is increase the overall scale of the pattern here. So to do that, we don't even have to go back to the texture and go into all those fusion layers to change it. What we can do is use the texture axis tool. So let's click on the object, because you have to click the object and have it selected. Click the material. Both of those need to be selected. And we're going to use this little tool here on the left hand side called the texture axis tool. So we'll click it, and now this cubic grid pops up, and it popped up cubic because we are in cubic projection. And you'll notice if you grab hold of the handles for this grid and you move it, the texture will move with it as well. And you can go from side to side, and the texture moves whenever you move the grid. But we don't really want to move it, we just want to scale it up. So let's grab the scale tool, and I'm going to scale this up to about maybe there, and we'll preview it. And now that looks a lot better. So I'm going to get out of that mode, and now what we want to do is create a material for the foot pegs. So I'm going to take the floor AO material and copy it, and we're going to call this one foot pads, and for the color I'm just going to make it a darker shade of gray. and then apply that to the footpad object here. And of course, since we are using the instancing, we only have to work with the first one, and all the other ones will be updated automatically. Okay, so that's looking good. Now we want to move to this little base part here, which is called the leg mount. So we'll go to the leg mount, and right now the leg mount seems like it's a little too linear and too hard. We've got a lot of sharp edges here, and of course in real life something like this is probably going to be welded together, and it's not going to be sharp like that. If you want to think about it, where these polygons meet together to form an edge, it's basically like taking two pieces of paper and putting them at a 90-degree angle and bringing them together on the ends to form a corner. And of course, two pieces of paper coming together, that's going to form a very sharp edge. Well, that's essentially what these polygons are doing. So we want to kind of round those out. Now, we can make a bunch of selections here and use the bevel tool, or we could just let a HyperNerve do it for us and then make some appropriate loop cuts in order to tighten up the corners. So let's click on the leg mount, and we want to alt-click a HyperNerve object, and of course the HyperNerve automatically smooth things out for us. So what we want to do is make some appropriate loop cuts in order to tighten up the corners. So we'll click on the leg mount, go into point mode, select the knife tool with the mode set to loop, and what I want to do is make some loop cuts around the outer perimeter of the socket. So one there, and one there, make one there, and over on this side as well. And then what I'd like to do is make one around the top. Now notice it's going, you can see the white line representing the loop cut. It's going all the way around, so I want to make one here that's going to go around the side, about there, and then one down here on the bottom as well. And now, with just those few loop cuts that we've made, now we've created this really nice smooth bottom mount, which actually looks pretty good. So now we can apply a material to this. So I thought maybe we could take something like, let's take this footpad material and copy it, and we'll make this a really dark black color. And then we'll introduce the HDRI into the environment channel. We'll take the amount to 15, and then we'll just blur it. And of course, diffusion, make sure effect luminance is on. And now, okay, we need to rename this to black. And we need to drop this as a child of the leg mount. Now we'll render. And it looks like we may need to take up the brightness of the environment channel, so we'll take it up to 25. There we go. Now we've got a really glossy type of look here, so perhaps maybe we want to blur it a little bit more. And there we go. Now we've got a really nice bottom stand here with those sockets, and now all the corners are rounded. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is determine what else we want to use the camouflage shader for. So I figured we could apply it to these two brackets here on the side. So here's the two brackets. So let's take the material from the ammo box, and let's control, click and drag down to the bracket. Now that pattern scale looks good, but if we render it, it's actually too small. And it's actually appearing too small as well on the ammo box. So what I'm going to do is delete the material for the side bracket, and I'm going to work on the one here for the ammo box. So I'm going to go to the texture axis tool, and you can see it hasn't come up, and that's because we need to select, remember, both the ammo box and the material. And then I'm just going to scale that up. That looks much better. And then we'll take that material and control click and drag to copy it to both of the side brackets. Okay, that looks pretty good. So let's go here to this side, and we need to put something on the pitch point. So I figured what we could probably do is take this aluminum shader, apply it to the pitch point object, and let's see if that looks good all being aluminum. Maybe we want to make the inside black. So let's go to Polygon mode real quick, and we'll select the pitch point, and we just want to make a loop selection on the inside, call up the set selection command, and in order to get to that you'll go to selection, set selection, and here's the dialog box for it, and we're just going to call this black. Drag the black shader over to the pitch point, and then grab that texture tag or that set selection tag and drag it into the selection box for the black material. Now we'll render, and now we have a black selection on the inside, which looks good. So now we want to apply this black texture here to the top cylinder and the bottom cylinder as well, which are these two cylinders that sit there. So now we want to determine if we want to make any type of set selection to these two cylinders. And I think I do. So let's click the top cylinder, go to Polygon mode, and I want this extrusion here to be chrome, but I want the inside to remain black. So I'm going to loop select that one. I'm going to loop select the inside loop. I'm going to hit UF to bring up the fill selection. Hold down shift, and it's going to fill in between those two loop selections. Call up the set selection command. We're going to call this Illum for aluminum. Drag the new aluminum material over there, and then drag the selection tag down there to the selection link box. And now we've got a nice aluminum selection on the outside. So we're going to do the same for the bottom cylinder, which I need to rename to bottom cylinder. Loop selection, hold down shift, another loop selection, UF for the fill, another hold down shift selection there. Set selection command, we'll call this one aluminum as well. And then this first aluminum material can actually be copied down to that one, because they both have the same name. And now we have those cylinders set up. So now we want to do the gun. So I figured the gun barrels can stay the aluminum material, but the tip, the mid cylinder, and the body can be black. So let's open up the barrels object. So we'll go to the mid cylinder, that's going to be black, tip is going to be black, but this new aluminum environment is going to be on all of these barrels. The main body is going to be black. So now let's back out and let's preview this to see what it's going to look like. Okay, so that actually looks pretty good. Those barrels, if you wanted to, you could duplicate this new environment aluminum shader and turn down the blur offset, and that would actually make them look more like a chrome material instead of being so blurred. And maybe I want to do that. Let's get a close-up look here. And maybe I'll just keep it like this for now. Okay, so the next thing, and that's probably going to be the last thing for the texturing, is going to be this ammo box. Now this is going to be a weird one. And I say weird because the ammo box currently does not have any type of beveling. So if we were to apply some type of shader to it, like this aluminum shader that we made, and we'll put this over here to the bracket has sharp edges. And to be honest, all of the edges are sharp. There is no rounding, or there is no type of beveling to any of this at all. So of course the first thing you want to think of is, well, let's just grab the bevel tool and start making a bunch of bevels. Well, the problem is that Cinema 4D unfortunately does not know how to make a proper bevel. And I will demonstrate what I mean. So if we click on the bracket and we go to line mode, and I'm going to do a loop selection here on the outside loop of this hole that we cut. I'm going to go to the bevel tool, a convex bevel. Now watch what happens here in this corner. When I start to bevel it, we get this unwanted nasty stuff going on here in the middle, and we get these 4 lines that have now shot out to the end point on the back side of the bracket. So now if we deselect the bracket, now we've got some problems, because you'll notice that there's a line shooting across there, and there's also one shooting down here, there's a little one there, and over here there's one running across. And if we were to preview this, of course those lines are going to show up as ugly shading geometry errors. So one way that we could fix this is to grab the Phong tag for the bracket and take the Phong angle down. Let's try a value of 25 like we've been using. Nope, that ain't going to work. They're still there. So let's go a little lower until we see those lines disappear. So it looks like a value of 9. Unfortunately, if the camera gets in too close to this, you can see here that these lines are not smooth. Because we've reduced the Phong angle, now the shading angle has dropped down drastically, and now these angles all have a linear type of appearance, which means when we render them, they are no longer going to be blended in with the rest of the side of the bracket. So now this is where we need to make up our mind on what we want to do. Do we want to have these type of edges? And if we do, is the camera going to be getting in close enough to see them? Well, I can tell you that this animation, the camera is going to be located back here somewhere watching the wall get destroyed. So if we were to preview this, those lines are not really going to be seen and the attention is not going to be drawn to them. So I really don't see an issue with this. However, if your camera was going to be zooming up close on that particular area, it's going to pick that stuff up and it's not going to look very real. So you need to make a choice whether or not it's actually worth using this kind of bevel or not. In this case, I really don't see a problem with it because the camera really isn't going to be getting in close enough to actually see those errors there. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the bracket, and I'm just going to do the same over here on this side. Go to the bevel tool, and I'm going to hit apply to reuse the same value as we did before. And I'm going to do the same for this rear one here. And we also want to round out some of these corners along the back side here because that's kind of too sharp. So let's click on the bracket again and let's see if we can make a loop selection. And that loop selection is doing some odd stuff right now. So maybe we can make a loop selection on that top loop that's going around the outside of the top. And then let's grab the live selection and let's hold down Shift to select these lines here along with those, this bottom one, and let's just see if we can do a loop selection along the bottom. Okay, and we also need to grab these here on the front corners, and now let's bevel and let's see what happens. So we'll make another little preview, and it looks like we're getting some shading errors up here in the corner right there. So let's figure out why. Okay, we're getting some overlapping geometry here, so we need to undo to go back, and now let's try to bevel this again, but we need to keep an eye on it to see where the... Okay, yeah, we're getting some nasty stuff going on there. So one way to fix this, to go into polygon mode real quick, and let's select all of these side polys there where those lines are, and the same for here, and we'll delete them, and we're going to right click and choose close polygon hole, and just click there and that will close it, and we'll close up that side as well. And now let's go back to line mode, and now let's make a bevel and see what happens. Okay, so now we're no longer getting that nasty shading error in there. Unfortunately, we had to do a little bit of geometry work there, and Cinema 4D greatly needs its modeling tools to be updated. I was kind of hoping in R12 that Maxon would update the tools and give us a proper bevel tool, but unfortunately that hasn't happened yet, so maybe in the next update for maybe 12.5 or maybe R13, maybe we'll get some proper beveling tools in there. I would like to greatly see an update for the modeling tools. Okay, so that about wraps it up for the texturing. If you want to, you could probably go in and apply something a little different to that ammo box. Maybe what we could do here is take the aluminum material here that we made, duplicate it, and this one here we're just going to call this bracket, and we'll go into the color channel and we'll pull this down to 25, and we'll apply this to the ammo, I'm sorry, not the ammo box, the bracket for the ammo box. And that's a bit too dark, so maybe we'll brighten it up to 50, take the environment channel down to 10, okay, so I guess that's alright. It really just depends on your own personal taste and what you think looks best. If anything, I think maybe we'll just go back to the original environment one that we made, and we'll drop this back over here to the bracket. I think that one will look best. Okay, so that wraps up this part on the texturing. And now in the next part, we can get started with the video wall that we're going to be making, and we'll go from there.